Most people believe innovation is talent. They believe discipline is personality. They believe success is luck. That belief is wrong. Innovation is not inspiration. Discipline is not willpower. Success is not random. They are brain functions. Every decision you make, every impulse you fail to control, every habit you repeat without thinking, is your brain running a program. And here's the uncomfortable truth most people never hear. When your brain is unhealthy, your life cannot be stable. When your brain is optimized, everything improves, not because of motivation, not because of affirmations, but because behavior follows biology. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your brain health. And today, I'm going to show you the one lever that determines whether your brain becomes sharper or slowly collapses without you noticing. Most people walk through life believing their decisions are conscious. They believe they choose how they react, what they tolerate, what they pursue, and what they avoid. That belief feels empowering, but it's largely false. The majority of human behavior is automatic, driven by systems running beneath awareness. And those systems live in the brain. Long before motivation kicks in, before logic speaks up, before discipline even gets a chance, the brain has already made the call. That's why two people can face the same situation and produce completely different outcomes. One stays calm and strategic. The other becomes reactive and emotional. The difference is not character, it's neurological function. Innovation, judgment, emotional control, and discipline are not personality traits. They are outputs. They are the visible results of invisible brain processes. When those processes are healthy, behavior looks intelligent and controlled. When they're compromised, behavior becomes impulsive, rigid, and self-sabotaging. This is where most people misunderstand themselves. They judge their failures as moral weaknesses instead of biological signals. They try to fix their lives with willpower while ignoring the machine that produces their behavior. Your brain is not a spiritual concept or a metaphor. It is physical tissue. It runs on blood flow, oxygen, nutrients, sleep, and electrical balance. Change the condition of that tissue, and you change the quality of your thoughts. Change the quality of your thoughts, and your entire life trajectory shifts. This is not philosophy. It's cause and effect. The brain is the organ of judgment. It determines how accurately you assess risk, how well you read people, how long you delay gratification, and how flexibly you adapt to new information. When it's functioning well, you make better decisions without trying. When it's not, no amount of motivation can save you. People often ask why they keep repeating patterns they consciously want to stop. Why they know what to do but don't do it. Why they sabotage relationships, finances, or health even when the consequences are obvious. The answer is uncomfortable but simple. The brain always chooses efficiency over intention. It will default to the strongest neural pathway available, not the most logical one. If your brain has learned chaos, stress, impulsivity, or avoidance, it will return to those patterns automatically. Not because you want to fail, but because your brain is doing exactly what it has been trained to do. This is why brain health is not a wellness trend. It is a control strategy. A healthy brain increases your capacity to pause, evaluate, and choose. It strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, foresight, and emotional regulation. That's the part of you that says no when something feels good but costs you later. That's the part that stays quiet under pressure. That's the part that sees opportunity where others see threat. When blood flow to that area drops, behavior becomes short-sighted. Emotions run faster than logic. You react instead of respond. Most people think they need more confidence. What they actually need is more cerebral blood flow. They think they need motivation. What they need is neural stability. Confidence is not bravado. It's the brain's ability to predict outcomes accurately. Anxiety is not weakness. It's a threat system stuck in overdrive. Depression is not laziness. It's often a brain operating with reduced activity and low energy. When you understand this, blame dissolves and responsibility sharpens. Because if behavior is biological, then it is also modifiable. Your brain is constantly adapting to how you live. Every night of poor sleep, every spike of chronic stress, every processed meal, every negative thought you accept without question sends a signal. That signal tells your brain what kind of world it's in. Dangerous or safe, scarce or abundant, predictable or chaotic. The brain then rewires itself to survive in that world. If you live as if everything is a threat, your brain becomes defensive. If you live without structure, your brain becomes disorganized. If you live with intention, consistency, and care, your brain becomes efficient and resilient. The most dangerous mistake is assuming your mind is separate from your biology. It's not. You don't think with your soul. You think with tissue. Tissue that can weaken, strengthen, inflame, or heal. When you ignore that, you hand control over to unconscious systems. When you respect it, you regain authority over your life. Because the quality of your brain sets the ceiling for the quality of your future, whether you acknowledge it or not. Your brain is not designed to protect your dreams. It is designed to keep you alive. That single fact explains more human behavior than any motivational quote ever could. Survival, not success, is the brain's primary directive. When the brain perceives threat, real or imagined, it narrows focus, reduces creativity, and prioritizes short-term relief over long-term outcomes. This is why people abandon goals under pressure, sabotage progress when things start working, and retreat to familiar habits even when those habits are destructive. The brain is choosing certainty over possibility. Most people believe stress makes them sharper. It doesn't. Acute stress can temporarily increase focus, but chronic stress degrades the very systems responsible for judgment and innovation. Prolonged cortisol exposure shrinks neural connections in the prefrontal cortex and strengthens circuits in the amygdala, the brain's alarm system. Over time, this shifts a person from strategic thinking into reflexive behavior. They stop evaluating options and start reacting. Their world becomes smaller. Their thinking becomes rigid. Their decisions become predictable. This is how brain aging accelerates, not with years, but with repetition. Every habit is a vote for the kind of brain you are building. Sleep deprivation, poor diet, inactivity, and constant mental negativity are not neutral behaviors. They are instructions. They tell your brain to downregulate energy, reduce blood flow, and conserve resources. The brain interprets these signals as evidence that the environment is hostile or unstable. In response, it reallocates resources away from higher order thinking and towards survival functions. Creativity fades not because you lost talent, but because your brain decided creativity is a luxury it can no longer afford. This is why people often become more rigid with age. It's not wisdom, it's neurological wear. A brain under chronic strain loses flexibility. It prefers the known over the novel. It resists change because change consumes energy. Innovation requires excess capacity. It requires a brain that is well-fed, well-rested, well-oxygenated, and emotionally regulated. When those conditions disappear, so does innovation. The brain becomes efficient but narrow, fast but shallow. The uncomfortable reality is that most modern lifestyles are perfectly designed to accelerate this decline. Short sleep, constant stimulation, processed food, social isolation disguised as connectivity, endless mental noise. These inputs slowly teach the brain that the world is unpredictable and demanding. In response, it adapts by becoming vigilant, anxious, and conservative. Over time, this adaptation feels like personality. People say they've changed or lost their edge. In truth, their brain simply adapted to the environment they put it in. But adaptation works both ways. The same plasticity that enables decline also allows recovery. The brain responds quickly when the signals change, increased sleep, and blood flow improves. Improved diet, and inflammation decreases. Add movement, and neurotrophic factors rise, stimulating new connections. Reduce chronic stress, and the prefrontal cortex regains control. These changes don't require belief. They require consistency. The brain does not care what you hope will work. It responds to what you repeatedly do. One of the most overlooked accelerators of brain aging is unchallenged thinking. When learning stops, the brain prunes unused connections. This is efficient, not cruel. Neural tissue is expensive to maintain. If a circuit isn't used, it's eliminated. Over time, this leads to mental narrowing. The person becomes less curious, less adaptable, and more certain, often without being more accurate. Certainty feels good to a tired brain. It reduces cognitive load, but it comes at the cost of growth. Equally damaging is isolation. Human brains evolve for connection. Positive social interaction regulates stress hormones, increases dopamine and oxytocin, and improves immune and cognitive function. When social bonds weaken, the brain interprets that as danger. Loneliness is not just emotional, it is neurological stress. Over time, it accelerates cognitive decline and emotional instability. This is why who you spend time with matters more than most people realize. The brain mirrors the emotional and behavioral norms of its environment. The key realization is this: aging of the brain is not passive. It is negotiated daily. Every choice either reinforces decline or signals recovery. There is no neutral state. The brain is always responding, always adapting, always reshaping itself to match the life you live. Once you understand that, responsibility becomes precise. You stop chasing motivation and start managing inputs. Because when the brain is supported, behavior aligns naturally. Focus returns. Emotional volatility decreases. Creativity reemerges, not as effort, but as a byproduct of a system finally operating the way it was meant to. Most people assume their thoughts are accurate simply because they appear in their mind. That assumption is one of the most damaging cognitive errors a human can make. Thoughts feel personal, authoritative, and immediate, so they are rarely questioned. But a thought is not a truth. It is a neurological event. It is the product of chemistry, wiring, past experience, stress level, sleep quality, and habit. When people fail to understand this, they hand control of their emotional state and behavior to the loudest signal in their brain, not the most accurate one. The brain is a prediction machine. Its primary function is not happiness or wisdom, but efficiency. It constantly scans for patterns and tries to anticipate outcomes with the least amount of energy possible. Once it identifies a pattern, it automates it. That automation shows up as thoughts that appear instantly without effort. These are automatic thoughts, and many of them are negative because the brain evolved to prioritize threat over comfort. A false negative is safer than a false positive. Missing a danger is costly. Imagining one that isn't there usually isn't. So the brain leans pessimistic by default. Over time, these automatic negative thoughts become reinforced circuits. Each time a thought is believed without examination, the neural pathway supporting it strengthens. The brain learns this interpretation matters. Fire it faster next time. Eventually, the thought no longer feels optional. It feels like reality. This is how anxiety disorders, depressive patterns, and self-sabotaging behaviors take hold. Not overnight, but through repetition. The brain is not attacking you. It is optimizing based on what you repeatedly confirm. The danger is not that negative thoughts exist. Everyone has them. The danger is identification with them. When a person believes their thoughts are facts, their emotional response follows automatically. Fear-based thoughts trigger stress hormones. Self-critical thoughts reduce motivation. Hopeless thoughts shut down initiative. Over time, behavior conforms to the emotional state created by these thoughts. People don't fail because they lack ability. They fail because their internal narrative collapses their options before action even begins. High-level cognitive control does not require eliminating negative thoughts. That is unrealistic and unnecessary. It requires creating distance from them. The moment you pause and question a thought, you shift brain activity from the limbic system into the prefrontal cortex. That shift changes everything. The emotional charge drops. Perspective widens. Choice reappears. This is not positive thinking. It is cognitive authority. The brain regains hierarchy with logic supervising emotion instead of the other way around. One simple question initiates this shift. Is this thought true? Not does it feel true, not has it happened before, but is it objectively accurate right now? This question forces the brain to slow down and evaluate evidence, even when the answer is unclear. The act of questioning itself weakens the automatic pathway. The brain learns that this thought is not absolute. Over time, questioned thoughts lose speed and intensity. New pathways form, ones associated with evaluation rather than reaction. Chronic negative thinking also has physical consequences. Persistent pessimism increases baseline stress hormones, reduces immune function, and decreases blood flow to areas responsible for problem solving and emotional regulation. This creates a feedback loop. The brain under stress generates more negative thoughts, which increase stress further. Eventually, this loop feels like personality. People say that's just how I am, when in reality, it's how their brain has been trained to operate. Gratitude interrupts this loop at a biological level. It is not about ignoring problems or pretending life is perfect. It is about deliberately activating neural circuits associated with reward, safety, and connection. When gratitude is practiced consistently, it increases serotonin and dopamine availability. These chemicals improve mood, focus, and cognitive flexibility. The brain becomes less threat-focused and more solution-oriented. This shift is subtle but powerful. Over time, the baseline emotional tone changes, not because life became easier, but because the brain learned a different default. Meditation functio. And similarly, by increasing awareness of mental activity rather than being consumed by it. Instead of being dragged from thought to thought, the individual observes them. This observational stance reduces emotional reactivity and strengthens executive control. The brain becomes less impulsive and more deliberate. Decisions improve because they are no longer driven by unexamined internal noise. The core principle is simple but unforgiving. What you repeatedly think, you neurologically become. Thoughts sculpt structure. Structure drives behavior. Behavior determines outcomes. If thoughts go unchallenged, they harden into identity. If they are examined, they become tools rather than masters. Control does not come from suppressing the mind, but from training it to serve reality instead of fear. Innovation does not come from chaos, pressure, or desperation. That belief is romantic, but it is neurologically false. The brain does not create its best ideas when it is overwhelmed. It narrows, conserves, and simplifies. Under threat, the brain's priority is speed, not originality. This is why stress-driven environments produce repetition rather than breakthroughs. People recycle old ideas, rely on familiar patterns, and resist risk, not because they lack imagination, but because their brain is operating in survival mode. A healthy brain, on the other hand, has excess capacity. It has the metabolic resources to explore, combine, and experiment. Creativity requires energy. It requires blood flow to the prefrontal cortex and balanced activity between emotional and rational systems. When those conditions are present, the brain can tolerate uncertainty. It can hold multiple possibilities at once without rushing to closure. That tolerance is the foundation of innovation. Without it, the brain seeks the fastest path to relief, not the best solution. This is why rigid people struggle to innovate. Rigidity is not a personality trait, it is a neurological state. It emerges when the brain is fatigued, inflamed, or overstimulated. In that state, the brain prefers predictability. New ideas feel threatening because they require effort and carry uncertainty. Over time, this resistance becomes habitual. The individual starts to dismiss new information automatically, labeling it unrealistic, unnecessary, or risky. What looks like wisdom is often just a tired brain protecting itself. Emotional regulation plays a central role in this process. A brain that cannot regulate emotion cannot innovate consistently. Strong emotions hijack attention. They consume working memory and reduce cognitive flexibility. When emotional noise is high, creative thinking becomes fragmented. Ideas may surface, but they lack structure and follow-through. True innovation requires the ability to stay calm while exploring the unknown. That calm is not temperament, it is neurological balance. Sleep is one of the most underestimated contributors to this balance. During sleep, the brain consolidates earning, clears metabolic waste, and recalibrates emotional circuits. Without adequate sleep, the brain's error detection increases while problem-solving decreases. Everything feels harder, heavier, and more urgent. Under these conditions, creative risk-taking collapses. People default to what they know, not because it is better, but because their brain lacks the resources to evaluate alternatives properly. Nutrition and movement further shape creative capacity. The brain relies on steady glucose regulation, healthy fats, and oxygen-rich blood flow. When diet is erratic or inflammatory, cognitive performance fluctuates. When movement is absent, blood flow drops and neurotrophic factors decline. These biological changes directly reduce the brain's ability to form new connections, Creativity is not a mysterious gift. It is the brain doing what it does best when conditions are right, connecting disparate information into meaningful patterns. Social environment also matters more than most people realize. Innovation thrives in psychologically safe spaces. When people fear judgment, rejection, or punishment, their brain shifts into defensive mode. Defensive brains do not take creative risks. They self-censor, conform, and minimize exposure. Over time, this suppresses originality, not only externally, but internally. The person stops generating unconventional ideas because the brain has learned they are unsafe. Healthy social connections, by contrast, regulate stress hormones and encourage exploration. The brain mirrors the emotional tone of its environment. One of the greatest threats to innovation is chronic busyness. Constant stimulation leaves no space for integration. The brain needs periods of quiet to synthesize information. Without that space, ideas remain fragmented. Insight requires downtime. It emerges when the brain is relaxed enough to wander, but stable enough to maintain coherence. This balance is impossible in a state of constant urgency. The truth is that innovation is a byproduct of stability, not struggle. It emerges when the brain feels resourced, safe, and supported. This does not mean life must be easy. It means the brain must not be chronically overwhelmed. When the brain is cared for, it naturally seeks novelty, improvement, and expansion. When it is neglected, it seeks efficiency and safety. Understanding this shifts the focus from forcing creativity to creating the conditions in which creativity becomes inevitable. Most people believe change is slow, fragile, and unreliable. They assume improvement takes years, that damage is permanent, and that once patterns are set, they are fixed. This belief keeps people passive. It makes them tolerate lives they know are beneath their potential. But the brain does not operate on hope or pessimism. It operates on signals. And when those signals change, the brain changes faster than most people are prepared to accept. The brain is adaptive by design. It is constantly remodeling itself based on what it repeatedly experiences. This process never stops. Age does not end plasticity, neglect does. What determines the speed of change is not time, but consistency. And new behaviors are introduced and maintained. The brain begins reallocating resources almost immediately. Blood flow shifts, chemical balances adjust. Neural pathways strengthen or weaken depending on use. These changes are measurable, not theoretical. What surprises most people is how quickly improvement can begin. Within weeks of altering sleep, nutrition, movement, and stress patterns, brain function starts to normalize. Decision-making becomes clearer. Emotional volatility decreases, focus improves. These changes often feel subtle at first, but they compound rapidly. The brain responds positively because it is no longer in constant defense. It interprets the new inputs as evidence that the environment is safer and more predictable. In response, it relaxes survival-driven circuits and reactivates higher-order functions. This is why people who commit to brain-supportive habits often report unexpected benefits. They don't just feel healthier, they think differently. Problems that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Impulses lose urgency. Confidence becomes quieter and more stable. This is not a personality transformation. It is a functional one. When the brain has sufficient energy and balance, it naturally favors long-term thinking over short-term relief. One of the most powerful shifts RS in impulse control. A healthier brain increases activity in the prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for delaying gratification and evaluating consequences. This makes discipline feel less like force and more like clarity. The urge does not disappear, but the ability to choose strengthens. Over time, this rewires behavior patterns that once seemed automatic. Habits that felt impossible to break lose their grip. Not because willpower increased, but because the brain regained authority. Emotional regulation improves in the same way. Chronic stress keeps the brain locked in threat detection. When stress inputs decrease and recovery increases, the emotional system stabilizes. Reactions slow down. Perspective widens. People stop taking everything personally. This emotional steadiness is often mistaken for confidence, but it is actually neurological balance. A regulated brain does not overreact because it does not need to. Cognitive flexibility also returns. The brain becomes more open to new information and less attached to rigid narratives. Learning accelerates because the brain is no longer conserving energy. Curiosity replaces defensiveness. This is a critical component of personal and professional growth. Without flexibility, experience hardens into limitation. With it, experience becomes leverage. The most important realization is that the brain does not judge your past. It does not care how long you have struggled or how many times you failed. It responds only to present input. This means no one is ever stuck in the way they think they are. Damage may take time to repair, but improvement begins immediately. The direction changes before the destination does. This also means responsibility is unavoidable. If the brain can improve, it can also decline. Every ignored warning sign, every compromised habit, every rationalized shortcut sends a message. The brain records it. Over time, those messages shape function. There is no neutral behavior. Every choice either strengthens or weakens the system that governs your life. The empowering truth is that control does not require perfection. It requires alignment. When daily behaviors align with what the brain needs, progress becomes inevitable. You don't force transformation. You allow it by removing the conditions that prevent it. The brain does the rest. And once it begins to recover, it does not stop at survival. It moves toward clarity, resilience, and capability, because that is what a healthy brain is designed to do. Here's the truth most people never accept. Your future is not decided by motivation. It is decided by daily brain inputs. Your brain is either becoming stronger or becoming weaker. There is no neutral, and no one is coming to protect it for you. Not your job, not your partner, not your government, not your religion. You are the guardian of the most complex organ in the universe. Treat it like garbage, and your life will reflect that. Protect it with discipline, and everything rises. Your money improves, your relationships stabilize, your confidence becomes quiet and unshakable, your innovation accelerates, because when your brain works right, you work right. And the moment you take responsibility for your brain, you take control of your life. That's not motivation, that's power.